Hey guys, I've been working on a very special way to build Revenant that I'm going to share with you guys today. And I'm going to showcase two different builds using this, but you could essentially build it in a much more versatile way with any ability that doesn't really benefit much from range. There are a few of those, such as Gloom, and maybe some other Helminth abilities that you could do without buffing range at all. And so it could work technically with any of those Helminth abilities, but I'm going to showcase two today, which have pretty interesting synergies. So, one of the builds is going to be a Revenant Loot build, and you heard it correctly, it's a Revenant Loot build, which I believe can compete even with Necros or Korra. I'm not sure about Hydroid, I haven't done the math on that one, but it seems reasonable that it actually can compete with all three of them in terms of generating loot. The other build is going to be a build that's going to allow us to one-shot enemies regardless of their level, meaning it's going to be Revenant with completely scaling damage that completely ignores level. So Revenant with scaling damage is going to be already pretty OP, especially because Revenant is already pretty OP based on the fact that he can have complete immunity for a pretty long duration and give his allies the same thing. So let's go over the builds and I'll describe all the various synergies that happen here. So first and foremost, I'm going to describe what Revenant's abilities do. His first ability, which we're going to replace, is the linchpin for the rest of his abilities, but we're going to throw it away and add other abilities into the first slot because all the second and third and fourth abilities are even more important and they each do their own thing. Meanwhile, thralls are a bit of an unreliable mechanic because let's say if you're doing an exterminate or capture mission, you don't really need your thralls to keep infecting other enemies. You're just going to push through and run through the level as fast as possible. And for that kind of fast-paced gameplay, thralls are not very good. They may be good a little bit for defense missions, but the AoE damage that we'll be able to dish out is going to completely overshadow anything you can gain from the thralls themselves. But thralls do actually interact with all of his other abilities, so we're going to have to sacrifice those interactions. So for instance, you would get Mesmer Skin charges back whenever you kill your thralls. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to rely on recasting Mesmer Skin. Reeve is going to kill your thralls instantly because it deals 120% of their HP as damage, meaning more than their full health, so they die instantly. And Dance Macabre, if I recall the interaction with the thralls, is that if they die from Dance Macabre, they explode with a pillar of energy damage or an energy pillar that deals significant damage to enemies and infects other enemies to become thralls. So we're going to give up all of those, and we're going to use the first slot because, like I said, the three of these are even more important, each doing its own thing. So, what's unique about this build is the infinite energy part of it. So, the whole thing that inspired me to make this build, or these builds, you could say, is that I wanted to figure out if there's a way to trigger Hunter Adrenaline on completely immune warframes, like Revenant when he has his Mesmer Skin active. And it turns out that Hunter Adrenaline does not work as long as you have shields. Therefore, we're using Arcane Persistence, so now, whenever we take enemy damage, either from enemy fire or from melee attacks, we'll convert 45% of it to energy. It only converts damage to health, so we're removing our shields completely with Arcane Persistence in order to benefit from it. Now, the rest of Arcane Persistence is completely pointless to us. We're only using this literally to remove our shields. So usually what this would do is if you have armor above 700, then you can't be dealt more than 500 damage per second. So as long as you can regenerate 500 damage per second and you have 700 armor, then you can kind of not die ever. But it has but magnetic status effects nullify it, so it's not as reliable. And besides, you can tell that we're running less than 500 health. That means that we could easily get headshot if we don't boost our health at all, which we're not going to do because we're immune. What's the point, really? So we're only going to use this to remove our shields. Without shields, even while we're immune to damage, any incoming fire or melee attacks are going to get converted into energy, topping up our energy all the way. And what's interesting about this, the Hunter Adrenaline specifically as a source of energy, is that Danse Macabre is an energy draining toggle ability. And in Warframe, all, or at least from my knowledge, all energy draining abilities disable energy regeneration for the duration. So let's say if you have the Zenuric energy regeneration active, while you have something that's actively draining your energy, like a toggle ability, you will not be able to benefit from regeneration at all. But that does not apply to the damage conversion from Hunter Adrenaline. So you could run Danse Macabre and boost it with left click to its maximum damage, and as long as enemies keep firing at you, you're going to be immune to damage because you have Mesmer Skin, and you're going to be dealing damage that is attenuated to the enemy weaknesses constantly, and your energy isn't going to drain because they're going to keep firing at you and keep refilling your energy, all the way back up. So with infinite energy, we're also going to be able to cast weird scythes, and here we're going to have to get into a bit of annoying math, and it's all based on Reeve. So Reeve, as I said earlier, when you have a thrall and you Reeve through it, you deal 120% of its 120% of its max HP. It starts by 40, which is affected by ability strength, and we're going with very, very high ability strength, taking a hit on range, but we don't really need range at all in this build. So the only thing that actually does benefit from range is the beam width of Danse Macabre. That's pretty much it. Not even the amount of beams or anything like that. It's literally just the beam width. And when you hold left click, you increase the width anyway. You double it. So it does the job regardless. So the reason why we have so much ability strength is Reeve still affects other enemies, but only 1/5 as much as it would deal to thralls. So this 120% health drain is actually equal to something more along the lines of 23% or 24%. So you would need to Reeve through enemies at least 5 times in order to kill them. That's no good. What could we do to change that? Well, Viral, when an enemy has 10 stacks of viral, they take 325% increased damage to health. So the math adds up in such a way that if enemies have 10 viral stacks and you have 295 ability strength or higher, and you Reeve through enemies that have 10 viral stacks, they will instantly die. That is why we're using weird scythes. I still do not know how to pronounce this first word, even though one of my favorite novels of all time has it in its title. Weird, I don't know, but weird scythes. And these will surround you for a very brief period of time, and it will slow enemies around you, but most importantly, it will inflict viral stacks on them. Now, this build also includes a build for Nautilus Prime, which I'm going to go over in a bit, in order to even further boost the viral stacking on enemies. So this entire build is going to be built around stacking and maintaining as many viral stacks on enemies as possible so that you can Reeve through them. Now, I'd like to show you this interaction because it interacts with Reeve not only in the sense of inflicting viral stacks, which you can take advantage of to one-shot enemies, but because it surrounds you, you can Reeve with them still on you, and then you could inflict the viral on way more enemies in the duration that they surround you. Now, as you can see, just our Reeve took out a whole bunch of these enemies, and it would be even more if I had my pet active. So let's actually just do that 1 second. I wanted to take my pet off to showcase that it's doable even with just the viral stacks from the first ability alone. Okay, let me put on my pet, and now you could see how easily it's going to wipe out enemies when you just reeve through them. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, everything's. I barely had the chance to reeve through them, and they're dead. So yeah, this is it. So you would activate this and then reeve through them. It will inflict a bunch of viral stacks because the ones that surround you continuously deal damage to enemies around you before they get launched, right? So you want to reeve through enemies while they're still revolving around you. So let me just showcase this one more time so you get the idea. You will activate this and then immediately reeve through enemies. And pretty much all of them die. And you're going to be completely immune to damage because we're running, in addition to Mesmer Skin, Rolling Guard. The way we're going to use this is probably just a very basic thing for Revenant, but I'll include this in this build because I'm going to make this a very in-depth build. So when you cast Mesmer Skin, if you would like to recast it, you become vulnerable for a brief period of time. You saw my health go red there. I'll show it again. My health goes red for like a second. But that second is enough for you to take a headshot. But if you have Rolling Guard, you first roll. Then when you cast Mesmer Skin, the immunity from Rolling Guard is still maintained. So that now you can refresh Mesmer Skin as much as you want, provided that you roll in between. Now, because we're going to be rolling in order to keep staying immune to damage, we're going to take advantage of something else. Look what happens when I roll. All these enemies are frozen. How the hell is that happening? And by the way, yeah, look what the pet does. I'll get into the pet build as well, because just the freezing of them is enough in and of itself to kill everything pretty much with my pet alone. And all of that damage that you just saw, the reeving, is, like I said, damage scaling. It deals 100% of the enemy's max HP as it drains 100% of their HP, meaning their HP gets drained completely. Another thing that I want to point out about Nautilus Prime, because we're going to be using this as well, and I'm going to showcase this build as well and explain a little bit about it. But Nautilus Prime is your weakness. Why? Because Nautilus Prime, for the most part, is not immune to damage. Even when you cast Mesmer Skin, it doesn't get any copy of Mesmer Skin. But when you reeve through enemies, it does. So always reeve through enemies to give your Nautilus Prime a Mesmer Skin charge. This makes your Nautilus Prime immune to damage. Meaning that all of the abilities that Nautilus Prime does, all the priming that it does, it sticks by you the whole time. So it's going to prime everything around you automatically. And it and you are both immune to damage, so you don't have to worry about losing any of the abilities that your pet is going to give you, and this build is heavily reliant on your pet. But that freezing thing I wanted to show you guys because it is a mod that I don't really see too many people talking about. But in my opinion, it's one of the... Sorry, not a mod, an arcane. It's one of the best arcanes in the game, in my opinion, right now. Because if you put it on your melee weapon, it's melee Korean. It deals... It adds a 2.5 multiplier of melee damage against frozen enemies. And on roll, you freeze all enemies in a 5x5, 5.5 meter radius. But what freezing means is they're going to get 10 cold statuses by merely rolling through them. That is insane. And it allows any melee weapon to become a stat stick. Because any melee weapon, it doesn't even matter which melee weapon. Let's take the one that I use the least, right? Yeah, usage. Let's roll all the way down. Let's take some, let's say, Oma. I haven't built it, I haven't done anything, right? Ooh, I would rather have one without a melee arcane adapter. So, let's take a prime. Dual Commas Prime. Do they have one? Sure, okay. So all you have to do is you have to put it in. You don't have to build it, you don't have to do anything. Now, whenever you roll near enemies, even when your melee weapon isn't equipped, right? I have my bow. If I roll nearby enemies, they all get frozen, and then my pet instantly kills them because they have so many statuses on them by including the 10 cold statuses. Again, I'll get to the companion build in a sec. I'm not the only one that uses a similar build to this on my companion, but in any case, that was just the freezing thing. So think of rolling as another ability, as a fifth ability that you're going to be using very often. And what it does is it allows you to maintain invulnerability the whole time. That's one thing. The second thing is it's going to cleanse status effects from you because Rolling Guard also clears status effects. And it's going to be an emergency immunity for when you need a panic button. And of course, like I said, it's going to give you a window that you would be able to be completely immune while you're refreshing the stacks of Mesmer Skin. Now, another thing I'm going to go over the mod selection here. So, Hunter Adrenaline, I explained why. We're going with Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, and Power Drift, and we're going with at least 2 Crimson Archon Shards or Tau Forge Crimson Archon Shards. And if you don't have these, you could use 3 regular red Archon Shards. That's going to give you 30 ability strength, which without these and without Power Drift, we will have 284, which is not quite above 295, which we would need to one-shot everything with Reeve. Right? So again, it's important to have 295 and above. Equilibrium doesn't really need to be here. It would work equally well because our energy income is from Hunter Adrenaline. So this is going to be your flex slot. Put whatever you prefer in here. I put Equilibrium because not in every mission I'm going to be able to reliably take enemy damage, and I still want to utilize energy orbs and stuff because you do still get energy when you have Dance Macabre active while picking up energy orbs. So energy orbs and Hunter Adrenaline are some of the only methods in the game to gain energy while you have Dance Macabre active. So we're going to be using both of those to try to regain energy. So we could spam our abilities. Our weird skin needs to be our weird sides need to be recast all the time if we want to stack viral on enemies and reave through them. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have infinite energy. And Reeve, keep in mind, also heals you. So occasionally, even though you're immune, various statuses, poison, whatever, might tick down your health a little bit. So if you reave through enemies, which you're going to do anyway because you want to stack Mesmer Skin on your pet as well, so you're going to occasionally also reave through enemies even if you don't really have to, like if you're going to be using Dance Macabre. Now, one thing about Dance Macabre is that you are not able to recast any abilities while you're using this, or at least you're not able to use most abilities. You're not able to refresh your Mesmer Skin. You are able to reave, though. So, if I... Actually, let me... Oh, I hope my pet doesn't kill them all just by itself. But I could have Dance Macabre, and I could dash, and it carries it with me. So, hypothetically, what you could do is Scythes, Dance Macabre, and then you could dash as well. And then you have the Scythes and the Dance Macabre and the Reeve damage all at the same time. Of course, it's only going to be for a burst of like 1 second because the Scythes have a very, very short duration. Speaking of duration, we are lowering it a little bit with Transient Fortitude because we're trying to bump our strength to what it is now. So like I said, Equilibrium, you could replace it with something else. For instance, Blinding Reeve. Because we're using low range, Reeve has a kind of limited width. So if you would put Blinding Reeve, you don't really benefit much from the augment itself. Like, okay, it blinds enemies, so I guess that's some extra crowd control that you could use. Which I guess is okay. It's not necessary because the sides, when you're gonna reeve through enemies, you're gonna have sides active, and they slow them by 71%, so it's gonna make them almost stunned as well. So the blind isn't really going to help you very much. I mean, it could if you really want to. And again, if you are comfortable regenerating energy from Hunter Adrenaline alone, by all means put in Blinding Reeve, and you could gain 40% extra range specifically on Reeve. So your range now goes up to 8.4 meters. That's going to be the main benefit from it, I guess. And if you don't want Blinding Reeve, another thing you could do is instead just add even more ability strength. Why? Because why not? We're going even overkill with Malt Augmented. All of this is going to be even more relevant in the second build, where we would want as much ability strength as we can. Here, 295 is enough. We're going with Malt Augmented just so that our abilities deal more damage, and why not? But I prefer it like this with Equilibrium, so that you have more energy reliability, even though you will not really have any energy problems for the most part. But again, you don't want to get stuck without energy when enemies aren't attacking you. So when you have Mesmer Skin charges, they don't really care that enemies are attacking you, and when you don't have Mesmer Skin charges, you're only in danger if enemies do attack you, and if they attack you, you get energy back. So with that energy, you could refresh your Mesmer Skin charges. So again, it's not Equilibrium. By all means, is not necessary at all. But for extra consistency in lower level enemy missions, this is fine. So now to get into the pet. The pet is not necessary for this build per se. It's going to be just there. The only way in which it interacts with the Revenant build itself is by being a viral primer. But this Nautilus build is so powerful that you wouldn't even really need to use Revenant's abilities, because Nautilus itself can just wipe out and nuke entire floors full of enemies, even in Steel Path. The more densely packed the enemies are, the more this build is going to destroy them. So this entire build with Nautilus Prime, besides the viral priming, is based on Contagious Bond. So when your companion kills an enemy affected with a status effect, any status effect, and if it has many of them, it's still the same thing. So whenever your companion kills an enemy, 50% of its status effects will spread to other enemies within 9 meters. So these statuses, especially if they're created by Nautilus itself, are going to spread, and Duplex bond is going to allow you to have extra copies of Nautilus Prime. The copies don't gain any of the actual bond abilities, but they will fire and prime enemies for you and make them easier to kill for your main Nautilus. And because your Nautilus is immune, and its clones are immune, and you are immune, you're basically going to be spreading viral, I don't want to say as much as a Sarin, but not too far off of that either. Momentous Bond is going to be one of the main tools that enables your Nautilus Prime to kill enemies, because usually most pets are pretty weak in terms of dealing with enemies, especially at higher end content. But Fired Up and Momentous Bond are both there to boost damage and increase statuses, which then Contagious Bond will spread, and Duplex Bond is there because you can then prime 4 times the amount of enemies, because your clones will start searching all over the place and go even pretty far away to find enemies. They automatically go out and seek enemies and sometimes outright kill them by themselves, even the clones. Fired Up will um, uh, add heat damage per hit, and it stacks up to 100%. Resets after 5 seconds with no hit. So Nautilus's weapon, the Verglass Prime, is a beam weapon which continuously fires. So there is never going to be a situation where you have 5 seconds with no hit, or almost never. And because you get more heat damage per weapon hit, you gain 100% extra heat damage, which our Verglass Prime is modded for. Viral and heat. Those are the two things you need for priming Viral for Reeve one-shotting, heat for wiping out enemies with Contagion, and I am using a pretty good, in my opinion, Verglass Riven. It has 2 positives and 1 negative, so that the 2 positives, which are the best ones in my opinion, are going to be way, way, way better. And Verglass Prime has a pretty huge Riven disposition, so Rivens are especially effective on it. So let's go over the weapon first. So we have a Rhyme Rounds and Malignant Force for the viral priming, because we obviously need the viral prime. Split Chamber for multi-shot, because multi-shot is overpowered. Primed Shred is absolutely necessary because both your main Nautilus and the clones are going to be able to have punch through. And of course, Rate of Fire is a damage multiplier, but the punch through is going to allow them to hit more than one enemy with their beam and prime all enemies hit by the beam, so this just makes it an even more crazy primer. So without Prime Shred, the priming is way less efficient. Keep in mind this is a must. Because, and we're going to use Rifle Elementalist for status damage. Because our Nautilus Prime is going to mainly kill enemies with status damage. It's going to stack hundreds of heat procs on an enemy, then the heat damage is going to be insane because of Fired Up, among other things. They're going to die, and then all those hundreds of heat procs are going to be spread. 50% of them are going to be spread to enemies around, and then they die, and then when they die, they spread those heat procs even further because they still count as coming from Nautilus Prime, and the chain reaction just nukes entire rooms. I'm going to show you in Steel Path how this works in a second, in the section of the video that I'm going to actually showcase everything. Rifle Elementalist, like I said, is for status, and extra punch through never helps because, like I said, punch through is the king stat here for this. Hammer Shot is extra critical damage, which we don't necessarily need, but status chance, which we absolutely do need. 80% is even better than the 60% mods, that's why it's here. Thermite Rounds is for heat, which again we also need some method of proccing. We have a decent status chance here, so we're able to pretty consistently spam. And with multi-shot, the status is obviously multiplied by 3.4 with the multi-shot, so we have a very high chance of priming enemies with this weapon. Anything I forgot about Nautilus? Okay, sure. Momentous Bond, whenever you kill an Eximus unit, which if you have easy missions with less Eximus units, your Nautilus isn't going to do as much damage, but you don't really need it to really do as much damage because the enemies are low level, they're going to die. On higher end missions, you're going to have a lot more Eximus units, meaning you're going to buff your Nautilus's Prime's damage. So what happens is it grants 120% bonus of a random elemental damage to your companion for 30 seconds. This does not stack with neither viral or heat. So let's say if you have electric chosen randomly, it's not going to combine with the heat proc and give you whatever their combined is. Instead, it's going to give you a heat proc and an electric proc separately, which is really important because, again, we're priming enemies and killing them and spreading statuses, so this is what you want. You're going to buff you're going to gain extra statuses to inflict the enemies with, and if you kill enough Eximus units, this could actually stack quite a lot, if I'm not mistaken. Assault mode is there in order to attack enemies generally, so you kind of need this in order for your Nautilus Prime to attack enemies. Primed Regen is there for 2 reasons. One of them is it reduces the recovery time by 35 seconds. As long as it's immune, you don't really need this. So if anything, this would be the flexible slot, but I find it's very consistent. And also, I use Nautilus Prime on all my Warframes. This is my main pet, and it does all this status spreading and insane damage on pretty much any Warframe. So I keep this here because other Warframes don't really. On other Warframes, he's not immune, so this does actually give it some tankiness and helps you recover it faster. Synth Fiber is here because I use Equilibrium, and if not on Revenant, because like I said, we don't need Equilibrium here, but because this is my main pet, I use Synth Fiber so that no matter which Warframe with Equilibrium I use, I'll be able to pick up health orbs even when I'm full health. They will convert into energy, and I could gain energy. So Synth Fiber is important to convert health orbs into energy with Equilibrium, which is why we want Nautilus Prime to be as immune as possible, because as long as it's immune, it cannot die, so it's going to be there to give us the Synth Fiber bonus. Contagious Bond, like I said, we don't really have to go into this too much because this is just the main thing that spreads statuses. Primed Animal Instinct is, I think, a must mod on every pet. Vacuum is a must mod on any pet because you want to pick up loot, don't you? Especially on the loot build. So, this is it. This is the pet. One last thing about Duplex Bond. So the thing that triggers the creation of clones is spending 100 energy. Every time you spend 100 energy, you get a clone up to 3. They last 30 seconds. But because we're going with as low energy efficiency as possible, because of Blind Rage, and we don't care about energy income, all of our abilities are more expensive. So this now costs 38. So we cast this 3 times, we get a clone. Mesmer Skin, we cast this 1.5 times, we get a clone. If we cast Reeve 1.5 times, we get a clone. If we cast Mesmer Skin, then Reeve, we get a clone. If we cast Weird Scythes and then Reeve, we get a clone. If we cast Dense Macabre, I don't know how this works. I haven't tested it honestly, but I assume that for every 100 energy that you spend, you get a clone, but maybe not. I believe it may only be from the initial casting cost of abilities. I don't know. But in any case, you would be spawning clones constantly because you would be using Weird Scythes and Reaving the whole time when you want to play more actively. So yeah, you have 100. This build gives you 100% damage immunity, and you could kill enemies with Reave very easily. Now, the second build, the loot build, is going to be a bit different. So now the slot that we had available with Equilibrium and stuff, because we didn't have another augment, here we do need another augment. So this ability has no augment, but Petrified does, and this is going to be our source of loot. Now, if you could see, it says 74% drop chance. If you add 60 ability strength for Molt Augmented, it's going to get pretty close to 100% extra loot. It's something around 90% extra loot, maybe above 90% extra loot. I'm doing a rough guesstimation in my head, right? So this is going to not only give you extra loot, it's going to add damage vulnerability to all the enemies that you petrify. Damage vulnerability is going to allow your pet to deal even more statuses and even more status damage and more easily kill enemies. So whenever you petrify a group of enemies, they're just going to get wiped off. So yeah, I would actually here make a tiny change and change this into this. You'll have slightly less ability strength, but Molt Augment is going to compensate for that. But you do need slightly extra range because the range on this is kind of low when we're going with the low range that we have here. But we don't really have any free mod slots. So we're going with high ability strength purely for the purposes of increasing our loot. But otherwise, the build's going to be very similar. Again, we have Arcane Persistence in order to remove shields. Going to have Hunter Adrenaline as our source of energy income. Oh, I again forgot to mention about the other augment, Mesmer Shield. This is an augment that is probably the strongest augment in the game. And I don't even know why I barely see any Revenants using this, but it makes your entire team immune to damage for at least 5 seconds. In other words, it gives them 5 Mesmer Skin charges. 5 Mesmer Skin charges means they can take at least 5 seconds of continuous damage, more if it's not continuous, and you can keep recasting this. So, if we're trying to think about the most min-maxed situation possible, Rolling Guard has a 7-second cooldown. You need Rolling Guard in order to have 100% uptime on your damage immunity. So how this cycle would start is you cast Mesmer Skin, you gain a certain number of charges, 20 charges, right? Whatever, however many charges. I think it's more 18, but whatever, you gain a certain number of charges. As they drain, when they start getting close to 0, like let's say if you have 5 or less left, you would usually roll, freeze all enemies around you, and remove all statuses and become invulnerable for 3 seconds. You would recast Mesmer Skin, but now you have a 7-second cooldown on Rolling Guard. So you really don't want to be casting your Mesmer Skin while it's still active without the immunity from Rolling Guard. So let's say Rolling Guard puts a 7-second rotation clock on how often you can cast your Mesmer Skin. Well, this gives them 5 charges. 5 charges is 5 seconds. Rolling Guard can be used every 7 seconds. Well, actually, 7 seconds for 3 seconds of immunity. So if you min-max and you can use Rolling Guard, on the 3rd second, you could cast Mesmer Skin while you're still immune on the 3rd second. 2 seconds already ticked off the 7-second cooldown. You have 5 seconds of it left. With 5 Mesmer Skin charges, your entire team is immune to damage. So within affinity range, if you roll exactly on time and you do this perfectly, this rotation, you don't have to do it perfectly, right? Because the charges usually last more than 5 seconds. But either way, you hypothetically could keep perfect uptime on both your immunity, your pet's immunity, and your entire team's immunity. So your entire team can be completely immune to damage, status effects, etc. for the entire duration of the match, as long as you keep refreshing their Mesmer Skins and Rolling Guard so you can recast it without being headshot. Again, we're super squishy with 310 health, and what you really, really want to be careful for is Nullifier Bubbles, because Nullifier Bubbles take away your Mesmer Skin charges, and even the littlest tap from an enemy is going to kill you with 310 health, so be careful in particular for Nullifier Bubbles. But that goes without saying in Warframe in general, right? So, this is going to be the loot build. Petrify is insanely powerful because it gives you both vulnerability, so they take more damage. It stuns everything around you for 25 seconds. Half a minute, they're just standing there, statues. You could use the fact that they're stunned to charge Incarnon weapons with headshots. You do whatever you can imagine. And the last thing I need to go over is actually, again, something that I didn't go over in the pet, and that's Cordon. So Cordon, or Cordon, what it does is, which is the whole point of Nautilus Prime over the other robotic companions, is that this one groups enemies for you. So, in summary, what this build does is it groups enemies, you're completely immune to damage, you support your team by making your entire team completely immune to damage, and your pet. You can regenerate health by reaving through enemies. You can one-shot them by reaving through them. You have infinite energy to spam as many abilities as you want, which will then create clones of your pet. Your pet and its clones are going to completely destroy everything around you and prime them so that when you reave through them, they're going to usually either instantly die or at the very least take a significant percentage of their health as damage. So if you reave through them twice, even without 10 viral stacks, they are very likely to still die. Because it's based on their max health, even if they're at 50% health, it's not like it's based on current health, it's based on max health, so they will still die in one shot regardless of how much health they have. This build is amazing. So let's actually go and try it out. And I should have activated Mesmer Skins right away. Where's Nautilus? Oh, I can't resin. As you can see, I could just cast this, and they're gonna attack me and refill my energy. As long as there's enemies to attack you, obviously. Forgot to mention that Reeve also acts, obviously, as a gap closing ability. So you could travel with it, use it as like a little dash. So see, now I'm already at 10 charges again, so I'm going to roll, recast Mesmer Skin, and again, I don't have to think about anything. And now that my Nautilus is back up and it's immune to damage, look what's going on. I'm not killing anything. I'm just letting my pet do all the work for me. The only thing I may do is I may roll sometimes in order to freeze enemies. It has no cooldown, by the way. It's completely broken. Oh, now I don't know what causes this, but when you see that you're on 2 health, you're not gonna die, but it is still a good idea to reave through enemies to restore your health back. So you're gonna run around and basically just petrify enemies to try to get more loot out of them as your pet kills them. Occasionally, if you want to speed up how quickly your pet kills everything, you would want to roll. Then it freezes everything. I should have actually. Let's reave through some enemies to restore health. See, we're taking a little bit of damage. It's fine. I'm not firing my weapon. I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing is I'm just rolling occasionally. Oh, by the way, yeah, probably the best way to min-max it is when you roll to freeze enemies so that your pet can get rid of them faster. If you're already rolling to freeze them, you might as well also cast Mesmer Skin at the same time. I mean, why not? Use the opportunity to do it. But yeah, this is the gameplay. As you can see, just run around, turn everything to stone. It scans all of these enemies that you turn into stone into the. It's as if you're using a scanner. Too late for that. Oh, and this is the worst acolyte that we could get. But it died without us touching it anyway. That acolyte is dangerous because it basically nullifies the Mesmer Skin and you become immune to damage. That's just, it is what it is. Now we're going to roll and recast our Mesmer Skin. And this is the gameplay loop.
Galdra is distracted, I'm taking the opportunity to make some new acquisitions. Like this. Don't worry, I'll share. Traction is ready.
All these statuses that are spreading, that's contagion.
If you wanted to buy longer,
You see those purplish, bluish numbers? That's from contagion, and they're all just dying from it. So as I said, this is a jack of all trades, master of all. Maybe not master at speed of covering a map, but it's still decent.
You conquer the foe, so you conquer yourself.
So that's for the loot build. Now let's show the weird scythes one. Probably a good idea to have, like I did, and have at least two yellow Cowforged Archon mods for casting speed, because you really want the animations of your abilities to be. This time I'm going to actually roll first, so I won't do the same mistake and die. As you can see, they just... Oh wait, I need enemies to actually fire on me, don't I? I need enemies, period.
Did I mention that the scrubbers are prone to spore buildup? That can spontaneously form a creature that'll absolutely bump your therapist up a tax bracket. Shoot off any buildup and you shouldn't have a problem.
Okay, now let's roll, refresh our Mesmer Skin charges, and let's get to work. So what you want to do is, like I said, you want to activate the scythes and then dash through enemies, and it's going to carry the scythes with you into those enemies and deal viral statuses at the same time as you're one-shotting things. This tank doesn't appear to take any viral damage, so you cannot do it to the tank. That's interesting to know. Then let's roll. Cover our Mesmer Skin charges. By the way, this build also kills Acolytes. I'll probably try to stay to show you guys how it kills Acolytes. And of course, when your pet is going to use Cordon, it's going to group enemies right into your sides.
Scrubber, overwhelmed. Coalescing into human form.
You roll, you recast this.
Now Scrubber activated.
Frozen enemies just die super quickly. This turns any content into a joke. Now, let's actually try to troll a little bit. I'll stand here and not do anything. I'll let my pet do all the work for me. But of course, these Eximus are not going to let me do that. Yeah, don't stand in the green beams. The green beams will actually take you out.
Do something about that scrubber before it does something
I think
about you.
we're gonna get an acolyte. Here we go. I'm gonna try to reave through it. As you can see, every time it gets hit by reave, it takes a chunk of its max HP damage. It doesn't deal 100% to acolytes because they have a special type of resistance. But it still works, just needs more passes through them. Roll, refresh mesmer skin charges. I'm standing here and letting... I'm hands off now. I'm letting my Nautilus kill everything. See all those damage combos? That just nuked everything in that area.
Galdra is distracted. I'm taking the opportunity to make
Very AFK friendly build here.
like this. Don't worry, I'll care. You've done enough. Marking extraction. Do more. A lot. You that's done the minimum at this point.
I don't know how we got 500 heat procs so quickly. But if we dash through him, he's supposed to die. There we go. That's the build. Have a good one, guys.